So how exactly can the United States begin to rebuild its shattered economy? Matthew Bishop from The Economist, welcome. You've written this book called The Road from Ruin, in which you spell out how to revive capitalism and put America back on top. How do we do that?
So the aim of The Road from Ruin is actually to say, let's look at why we got into this mess and how we can get out of it. So it's not a blow-by-blow account of who did what to whom, but really trying to look at some ideas. And fundamentally this crisis was a failure of ideas. There was a set of beliefs that people had that dominated the markets, the world economy for 25 years that actually ran out of steam.
Such as no regulation?
Such as very light regulation, the idea that markets are always efficient, the idea that the central banks could actually avoid there ever being boom and bust and that bubbles didn't happen. All those sorts of ideas I think have been shown to be wrong. And actually there's a lot of work going on in economics at the moment that actually allows us to have a better set of ideas that are much more realistic about how markets really work and how people really work and how institutions work. So we need to embrace all those ideas and put them in what the Fed does and so forth. Secondly, we need to actually fix the regulatory problems that were in the system. I mean, I think there was this caricature of capitalism that it could work without government at all. And then on the other side there was a dislike of all markets and that government was always the answer, and we actually just need to come up with a much smarter set of rules and regulators who actually do what they're supposed to be doing, and that way we can get the markets to work better. We need to put, I think Americans have also in policy focused far too much on America as a self-contained economy, and this was fundamentally a global crisis, and we have a global economy that is not properly overseen. So there's all these national regulators, none of whom are really up to scratch. We need a system of global rules and regulations that actually address some of these global imbalances, like the power of China and rising power of China and the fact that its money is flooding the American economy and so forth.
And so we've got pretty much everyone trying to grab cameras and give the sound bites of what we've got to do to fix it and so forth. No one seems to be really interested in that anymore. We've got such problems actually fixing the economy. So right now, seems we put aside what to do to make sure it doesn't happen again. How do we fix what's going on right now, the 10% unemployment rate and other imbalances? Well,
I think one of the things we do in the book is to go back throughout history and look at the major crashes, major bubbles, major crashes, and what happened afterwards, and try to learn some lessons from that. And I think we are at a position now where America could go the way of Japan in the 1990s. It learned the lesson of the Depression in the 1930s by saying, well, okay, we can't let the banking system melt down, we've got to put a lot of money into the economy. But in Japan there was a process of denial about how the credit creation process worked, and problems were just postponed endlessly. And there was no real getting to grips with the regulatory challenges in the system, and I think that is the danger that we're in America at the moment. So there's a need for leadership, which it actually means asking some tough questions about how the system can be improved.
And do you think we are in denial? Because every day I hear people say, oh, but we're not Japan, because we forced our banks to admit that they made all these terrible loans and so forth.
Well, no, my view is that the banking sector is in denial because things got better so quickly, and they were in fact bailed out by trillions of dollars of taxpayer money, and therefore that something has to change to make sure that we don't repeat that cycle of the profits being made by the banking sector and then the losses being taken by the taxpayer, which is not what capitalism is supposed to be like.
So when do you think we start to actually create reforms that matter? Will we do it, or will this all just be swept under the rug if things start to get better?
Well, I mean, I think it's a really big challenge. I mean, the government, firstly, I think it had to stimulate the economy, but it's going to, at some point pretty soon, going to have to figure out a way out of that stimulus process. And that's going to be really difficult because what politicians have shown over the years is they're very good at spending money, they're not very good at stopping spending money. And so, I worry a lot that we're going to see a lot of inflation problems coming suddenly a couple of years down the line. I think there's going to be a real danger that the midterm election cycle, having lost in Massachusetts, there's going to be a lot of pressure on the Democrats to do some very populist things rather than necessarily the right things. Already we're seeing a repeat of the hearings that, in the 1930s we got the Pecora hearings, which produced a lot of bad regulations to meet the populist appetite rather than the intelligent regulations. But there's no one at the moment in the system showing leadership. The banking leaders, are all basically saying, don't do anything, we want to go back to normal, and the politicians are all thumping the table but actually not doing anything either.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to summarize, it sounds like you think there is conceptually a road back from ruin, but that we are meandering all over the place and not particularly headed down that road.
Yeah, and I think, actually every bubble that we've had in history, I think almost without exception, has come out of a real innovation, something good that's been done, either a product or innovation in the financial markets. And those economies that have come out best from the crash that follows the bubble have been those that have actually said, well, let's make the innovation work better for us. And those that have done worse have been those that have said, let's get rid of risk-taking, let's get rid of the innovation. And I feel there's a real pressure to just crack down on innovation and risk-taking in the financial system here, which could really prolong the crisis.
Let's hope we don't go down that road.
Right.
Thank you, Matthew.